to do the call to order?
Temporary, yeah. If you could start the meeting until we elect the chair and vice chair.
Okay.
Um,
I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Get into the microphone.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I will do the roll call. Committee member Frederick?
Present.
Committee member Norris? You talking to the microphone? I just called your name for a roll call. If you could answer here.
Okay, Sally Norris.
Committee member McCary.
I'm here.
Committee member Lisa McCary.
Here.
And committee member Bridges.
Here.
We'll need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
We don't have any presentations or announcements tonight, but we have public comment. So if anybody in the public wishes to make a comment on an item that is not on the agenda tonight, this would be the time. Seeing none. Move on. All right, we have committee member introductions. If everybody wants to just go ahead and introduce yourselves, we'll start with Steve over here.
Echo in the voice. Do you hear the echo?
Yeah.
It's from the phone.
It's from the
I'm not the only
phone.
one hearing the echo.
My name's Stephen Frederick. I live here in Ione. I actually live up the street. I don't really have any affiliation with the creek besides my background. I work I'm the general manager of the Jackson Valley Irrigation District. I manage Lake Amador and all the water that leaves Lake Amador, which includes creeks, pipes. I have about 200 irrigation customers and currently about 140 treated water customers. My background is I graduated California State University, Sacramento in 2003. I grew up here locally. I'm an Argonaut High School graduate, and I moved out of the county to see what the real world was and decided to come back. I have very deep roots to this county that go back to the gold rush, and so I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. I like Ione. I have a strong connection to Ione, and the reason that I applied for being on the creek committee is I do feel there is a concern with how the creek is being managed, and it really became evident in 2017 when we had the large storms and the creek almost went over its banks. And since then there has been vegetation growth and there's a lot of issues, and I'm not talking cosmetically, but just how the creek is managed that I think we really need to get a handle on. And I think I have some skills or some experience to be able to bring to the table and offer the city of Ione, with my background being manager of the Jackson Valley Irrigation District, on the way I deal with the Fish and Wildlife Service, the way I deal with federal agencies, state agencies on a daily basis. Not saying that I'm a phone call away from a lot of these people, but I do know the avenue to take in some of these things to be able to get things done. So I guess that's a little bit of a background. We'll let other people introduce, but I'm free to answer some questions about any experiences that I had. I deal a lot with the fish and wildlife and that sort of thing, so I felt that I would bring a lot to the table. So thank you.
Great.
Thanks. Sally, you want to go ahead?
Yes. My name is Sally Norris. I've been in Ione for 24 years. I lived in Salinas, and I retired and moved here to get away from fog and get some warmth. And I do live by the creek, so I see the creek. I love the creek, and I know what's happening to it. It's terrible. I don't have any experience with the creek other than I do live by it, and I understand it, and I know what it can be if it's taken care of properly, and I'm willing to do anything I can to help. Thank you.
Which creek do you live next to, Sally? Mule Creek or?
No, I'm Sutter Creek. I'm off of Spring Creek Drive.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm Don McCary. I grew up in Ione. My parents moved here in the early to mid 60s and learned how to swim at the dairy hole there. I've hiked up and down the creek all the way to Sutter Creek. We used to tube down there and brought my sons along with me and now the grandkids. So it's been a big part of my life. And I grew up in Ione, graduated from Ione High School, graduated from Sac State, and I've had a lot of different sales jobs. I'm been in propane for the last 16 years, and I'm general manager of Ebbets Pass Gas Service up in Arnold. So I commute every day, unless I work at home. We have almost 9,000 customers and have a lot of experience with regulatory, dealing with the state. We have propane days once a year where we talk to senators and assemblymen and try to convince them that propane is actually a clean fuel, as they want to move everything electric. It's just not feasible. So we do that by Zoom. Did it this year by Zoom meetings, but usually we meet at the Capitol. So I have some experience in that, but really just a passion, as you said, looking at the creek, not just, the looks of it, but also everything, what's coming down the creek.
Wildlife that's there when there's water.
Yeah, there's, river otters way up the creek. It's amazing when, what a great resource we have, so.
I had otters mating right under my deck. Just last week. The water dried up, so they had to leave, but they were gone. They was making their home there, but then the water dried up.
That's nice. So we own property outside of Sutter Creek about a mile, and the creek, we have about a mile of creek that goes through it as well. So we're interested, in conserving what's there, but also looking forward to trying to find out what agency, where do we go? I'm not afraid to knock on doors and get things rolling, so hopefully I'll be an asset that way.
Is your property in Amador?
It's in Amador County. Yeah, it's 1 mile up Sutter Creek Volcano Road. As you turn the corner across the bridge there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Lisa?
I'm Lisa Vicari, and I lived here in Ione for off and on several years, but I was born and raised in Jackson. And I don't, I'm sorry. I'm really interested in the creek too. So, and we started the Ione Beautification Project, and we started working a lot down at the creek and the bridge and cleaning it all up. And that's when I started noticing all the overgrown plants and don't like how it's obstructed the creek. So that's why I joined it, and just like to see some things get going on. So, thank you.
Well, I got to start out by saying how impressed I am with all of you folks. I don't really fit in right here, which may be a good thing. I've lived in Castle Oaks for 10 years, and I have a degree in math from a college in Louisiana. Let me see, I was a retired certified safety professional. I worked for a large insurance company for 35 years, visiting industries that we insured, helping with their safety efforts. I believe I would be an asset to the committee, and otherwise I would have signed up. I'm very open-minded. I'm not a tree hugger by any means, but I'm not a wannabe developer either, so I'm flexible. Okay.
Thanks, Tom. You know, it's election of committee chairman and vice chairman.
How do we go about this when we just met each other?
Well,
I'd like to nominate Steve for the top position,
The chairman?
the chairman. I think
You seem to think I might make agendas and do board meetings? I did one last night till about 9:30, so.
No, I think your experience, what you said, dealing
Yeah, I
with
think
fishing
you-
game and everything, that's, and
Yeah, I
I
agree.
think that would be,
is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
So,
All in favor?
Aye.
I accept.
You were very glad.
pretty excited about it, I see there, Steve.
It's not a problem, no.
And I think I'll nominate you for the second chair.
I second.
you second what?
I second her nomination for Dawn to be the vice chair.
I said, yeah, great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, I'll
Motion
accept.
passes. And then the next item is review of the mission of the Creek Committee. Is John gonna handle that over the phone?
I assume so.
I put,
John?
John, I put information in the council packet in terms of the mission of the Creek Committee, the review of the Brown Act requirement, and some natural, review of some resources. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going through those items. I think the committee can read those. We can do some training on the Brown Act, because that gets a little bit long to do, especially over the phone system. So I just kind of want you to be aware of those items. I think for this meeting, the first meeting, I think it's more important that the committee sit down and start discussing, their goals, the path, the priorities, what they want to accomplish, to kind of get things set so that it's your committee moving forward. I don't want to be the one trying to hand you, here's the agenda in terms of how I think it is. This is your committee, we're interested in hearing from you. So like I said, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the items. I just kind of want to point out, again, here's the mission of the Creek Committee. There's information about the Brown Act requirements. There's some resources that, you're going to reach out to. There'll be more as I find more. So like I said, I think the important thing for tonight's meeting is for the committee members to discuss the goals, the path, and the priorities that they want to set for themselves.
You want me to open it?
Be great to hear.
So, I mentioned this kind of in my intro, but I think some of my goals are to, the city itself is a governing body, and we have a lot of issues going on with the creek, and one thing that's been brought up is property owners own to the center of the creek. And it's going to be hard to convince every person to go out there and spend thousands of dollars to clean their section of creek. And growing up in Jackson, I've always been familiar with the CAL FIRE crews going up and down the city, because that city realizes if you don't clean the creek, you're going to have some severe problems, especially even with City Hall or the National Hotel. And what my goal here is just to have the city take some type of action or organize something that can unite the members, or the people, not the members, but the owners that own portions of the creek, to be able to understand, number one, it's a liability to have all this large vegetation in the creek. It's not a liability just for you, it's a liability for the whole city. And I'll bring it back to in 2017, and I have a picture of this. We were only about a foot from capping over that levee.
I have a video of it.
Yeah, it was a little scary. And if that went over, I think we would have been in a whole different situation. You wouldn't even have a creek committee right now. You would have had FEMA come in. You would have had the whole city in an uproar about how do we fix the grocery store and Ace Hardware, because it would have been flooded. And my goal with this committee would be just to inform everybody that there is a problem, and there's ways to beautify the creek, and there's also ways to manage the creek to where it benefits all of the citizens of the city. And that would be my ultimate goal. Is I'm not really concerned, and I don't shoot me for saying this, for beautification of the creek. I want that creek to operate as a mechanism to protect the citizens of the city. And I know there's issues coming from upstream, and there's going to be a lot of easement issues, a lot of legal issues, and I'm ready to dive headfirst into those as part of this committee. Those are my goals.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Clean the creek, make it look good, and not to keep the mic here, but I might as well just throw this out there. I have some history with the creek, and my grandfather used to take a bulldozer up and down this thing for about 20 years until they decided not to pay him, I guess, anymore. And, you know, this is back, say, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, when that was an okay thing to do. Now, of course, we have things to deal with environmental issues. There's probably not too many cultural issues associated with the creek, but those do have to be taken into consideration. And I do feel, with my experience, we can maneuver those to, you know, get our goal of, I just drove across the creek to get here, and we have trees that are, 50 feet tall sitting in the middle of the creek,
Yeah.
and everybody's pointing the finger at whose problem it is. It doesn't make sense.
And it's a blight, for one thing, for the community, along with the bridge. And, you know, we've talked about that. Something needs to be done about the bridge too. Although that might not fall under our realm, but yeah, I would have no problem approaching property owners and filling them in on, you know, their responsibilities. We have to find or acquire a list. I don't know how to go about that. I guess, you know, some research. I don't know if the city can help with that, but also, you know, it'll probably be a shock to a lot of people. But as far as just cleaning it and everything, we have enough volunteers where I think if that's allowable, since, you know, I don't know, with the legal issues with being a property owner coming on their property, you know, liability and things like that. But we definitely would have the people, and like you said, your grandfather, we know plenty of people with heavy equipment, if that ever
I don't think that's the way we have to approach this. I'm just saying that, you know, the mentality back in the old days was a little different than it is now.
Yeah.
And they understood the need to have a clean creek. That's a conduit. We need that water to come down and get out of the city. We don't need to try to back it up and create problems for downtown or Tilly's. You know, Tilly's has a horrible flooding problem right now. You see poor Loretta out there putting sandbags in. How is that related to the creek? We have a lot of issues.
Right.
And maybe the first part is just to take a little trip up to the city of Jackson and ask them how they deal with their problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we could solve a lot.
See, I I know that on the side of the creek I'm on, we own to the middle of the creek.
Mhm.
Well, I always was understood that the other side just owned to the top of the creek, that they didn't own down in the creek, but they're lower than, no, they're higher than me. But on the Brown Act, I read that, and the way I understood it, each party owns to the middle.
Yeah.
So that needs to be, you know, discussed, because I know I have one friend that lives on Poppy Lane, and so they said that they just own to the property line, the top of the creek, that they can't do anything down in the creek. But then according to the Brown Act, it sounded like both sides had that, you know, because I know I've got rocks. I put in, when I first moved in here in '96, we had a bad one. It flooded, it took out half of my flower beds, it eroded all the dirt around the pilings in my deck. So I put $10,000 worth of rock on mine because I'm 15 feet up. I've not lost a rock in 24 years, but I do have to go down now that it's dried up and hire somebody to clean up underneath. But if each property owner, like my neighbor next door, they trimmed a tree down until it was like stumps. Well, you know what that does. It grows wild then. That tree is almost covered the whole creek, and it's down and it started growing back up out of the creek. She said she's got somebody to come and trim it, but I mean, it's a major problem. But I think we need to send out letters to these people and give them a timeline. I don't know if we're able to fine them. If they give a timeline there to clean up the creek, if they don't, I don't know, that would be.
Well, as soon as they know they're responsible for it, I think that you're going to see some action that people don't even realize that. I've been approached, and so as soon as they know, and we can give them some, maybe someone can help them, maybe they're willing to pay to have it done, but right now they think that it's up to the city, so.
There is a real gray area with this. She mentioned putting rocks in the creek. You know, you might get a fish and game warden coming out and saying, hey, you're damaging the stream bed.
No, this isn't the creek, it's the bank.
The bank could be included.
Really?
There is a very gray area to where we need to really hammer down on a fishing game or become friends with basically the fishing game and say, what can we do? Because I'll tell you, if you put rock down too low in that creek on your own accord, you're going to be responsible. And I've seen fines up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this is out of farmers in my district, putting rock down into the Jackson Creek. If you cross a line, and there's no line that is written, it is up to the discretion of the officer where this line is.
It wouldn't stop the water.
But what I'm getting at is we need to inform these residents what their responsibility is and what they can and can't do within that creek, and where the city can come in and maybe help them and guide them to either manage their section better or maybe even offer a service that can help them out to manage their portion of the creek.
So you think it's mostly fish and game?
At this point, you're dealing with possibly the Army Corps of Engineers out here, and you're dealing with the Fish and Wildlife Service. I keep saying fish and game because I hate to date myself, but they're fish and game to me, but they are called California Fish and Wildlife now. This is, I'm almost guaranteeing, considered a navigable stream, so the Army Corps of Engineers would get involved. And it gets complicated. Like I said, it's not going back there in 1960 and taking a bulldozer and pushing it up and oh, we got some extra gravel, let's sell it to somebody that needs some gravel. It's not that anymore. And you know, the city has a role in this to help the people manage, because I'm sure there's people like Sally here that, well, I'm just going to dump some rock in there. Next thing she knows, she could have a game warden knocking on her door because she did something wrong or tearing down a tree that she doesn't like anymore, but it's affecting the stream bed. It becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So before we reach out to all the residents, we need to get all the information available so that when they have questions, we can answer them and then they'll know what to do. Because if we reach out to them right now without having information, so Mark, that's for you.
So to bring this back on task here, we have an agenda item, what our missions are. We've kind of got off track. Sally's kind of mission is informing the rest of the residents of what they can and can't do is what I was getting. Dawn, you had I don't really recall what your mission was on the creek besides, cleaning it up and doing basically the same thing I was suggesting. And maybe Lisa, let's continue the mission statement here.
Yeah.
What's your mission with the creek, Lisa? Is it to make it pretty? Is it?
No. That's how we started it, but then we realized that there's a lot that needs to be taken care of, and since you have connections, we're gonna look to you to maybe get some answers for us, and then we can get something together, and I'd like to start a website for people to be able to go onto, and we can have all the information on there, and then they can reach out to us, and instead of just sending them a newsletter.
So the goal is information again.
Yes, and we're a lot, and I can help. I'm really good at researching.
Steve, you mentioned that it could possibly be classed as a navigable stream. I thought it was a non-navigable stream.
It gets very complicated, Tom. If there's water that flows and connects to the delta, they can work their way back up, and they've changed the rule recently under the Trump administration, and I don't know specifically what it is, but when I was dealing with some construction issues in the Jackson Valley, they were considering a seasonal drainage as a navigable stream because it was connected to the ocean.
Well, that-
And it had, like I said, don't mark my words because some things have changed since I was dealing with that about 5 years ago. But I'm not quite sure, but I'm almost positive the Army Corps of Engineers is involved in this.
Well, that changes the whole plane, the whole game.
Yeah, you bring a federal level in as well as the state level.
Well, in addition, the property owners would no longer have the property up to the middle of the stream if it's a navigable stream.
They still own it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give an example, and this is a situation that I just recently dealt with on a large construction project in Jackson Valley, and it had to do with a road, Jackson Valley Road. You might not be aware, but almost 99% of the people in Jackson Valley own to the center of the road. So who's responsible to maintain the road? Well, the county has a county easement through that section. The county has certain things that they have to do to maintain the road, which people have gradually over time let the county do. But if somebody really wanted to push hard, and you'll see this out there where people build fences right up to the ditch, which is the very edge of the, so it's almost the same situation with a creek where people are owning down to the center of the creek. You have other people in play as part of the jurisdiction over the creek. So you have the Fish and Wildlife Service, you have the Army Corps of Engineers, and basically, to do anything, you have to go in and get their blessing to do it.
So
And even as a private owner.
what are we talking about? Like from Lou Yeager's to Scully's? I mean, what's the sphere of influence or?
I would tend to say that everything within the city limits.
Everything within the city. Yeah.
Okay, because
We
I
actually have
don't know
our
where it
maps.
actually goes this way, probably the last house up there,
I think
like
it's Yeager.
Lanes or one of those.
Yeager. Louis Yeager.
And then how far down to the bridge, or actually really past the bridge, right? Past the corporation yard and where Dry Creek and Sutter Creek?
I don't think it's that far.
Then what
I
about?
have maps. So for the next meeting, I will draw maps.
Okay.
We have large maps showing property lines. And then I also have individual parcel maps that show the property that the actual owner owns. And some of them will actually go to the creek, to the center of the creek. So I will have all that for the next meeting.
Okay.
How far does it go, like, when you get on, Marlette, you go down, by the trailer parks? Where would we stop, like, to, that's the
Goes
first?
over to 5 Mile Drive, the corporation yard and the sewer plant.
What about Mule Creek then? I mean, that
That's
eventually
out
runs
south.
in, is that, I know there's a lot of issues going on now, that we won't have anything to do with that, because it said different drainage and things like that. So I don't know if,
Well,
I mean, I
I
didn't know
mean,
if
Mill Creek is,
They're in the city limits.
is,
City limits, it's
yeah,
it's
within
fair
the
game.
it's,
city
and that
limits.
is now then, right? Yeah.
Take them on.
If I could make a suggestion, at least for right now, I would think we got to agree on a mission statement, which the original letter, I thought, had a very appropriate mission statement. If we can do that and contact all of the property owners that Janice is gonna round up for us, I would hope that 75% of them would be, oh, this is a great idea, yeah, I wanna help, I'll fix my part up, and the other 25%, then we have to deal with. But for right now, isn't that our original idea, to contact the property owners? So first we have to get a list of the property owners.
I think we need to educate ourselves first of what the issues are specific to the creek. And then we have to educate ourselves on who owns the creek and what their responsibilities may be, because I think we all need to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
With what your question was, is who does what and what can they do?
Right,
Because I'm bringing up some concerns about, you have governmental agencies that are going to be a part of this.
yeah,
And it's almost as if we need to become best friends with the Fish and Wildlife Service to get some guidance on what we can and can't do within the creek boundaries. Before we start sending letters out, let's get on the task of, okay, let's become the professionals so we can reach out to these property owners and then give them options of what they can or can't do, and the option may be the city's willing to help you, or you're responsible for this piece.
yeah.
Maybe going back to my first thought, not trying to steamroll this, but going to the city of Jackson. I'm sure they have the same issues. And I know I go to Bank of America and I see CAL FIRE crews marching up and down that thing before spring every year, or before winter every year. You know, and this has been going on for years. And I'm sure we can either talk to the property owners, city manager, and we could start there to get the ball rolling on this idea. But we have a lot bigger issue, and that is we have a bigger creek. We have, I don't know, more potential damage from flooding, but there's also a levee here. And I'm not sure if you've seen it, but who's responsible for it?
Is there any
Is it the
control?
property owners that are responsible for a levee that they never built? That's a big deal.
Where's the levee?
When you cross the creek, next time take a look right behind the little doctor's office, right where that's a levee,
Yeah,
and that brings in a whole nother ball of worms. Okay, what if a gopher drills their way through the levee? Who's responsible to fix the gopher hole? Everybody's pointing fingers. And I think with this committee, we just need to become the professionals and educate ourselves so we can go to the public and help them out. If the public doesn't want to do anything, then they're liable. But we have to be the experts to give them options, or we have to be the ones to come up with some type of solution,
I agree.
rather than just letting the trees grow.
Right. Is there any control on Center Creek, any dams?
No.
What about Mill Creek, same thing?
No, well, that's a great question, because there is water that's added from the Mule Creek State Prison that it could be considered, but I don't think it causes damage,
Yeah.
as in flooding. That's a whole different issue. I think maybe we should focus on maybe the creek that we all know and understand before we jump into the one that's somewhat controversial.
Yeah,
I do know that somebody can hold water back. Because I've been there 24 years and I've seen that creek get completely dry and the next day there's water in it.
So
Somebody's holding it.
I'll give you, I hate to take over the mic here, but so the foothills, Lake Amador is a 56 square mile watershed. It's a rainfall only watershed. The Sutter Creek watershed, which is the watershed that provides water down the Sutter Creek, is basically a rainfall watershed. These are flashy watersheds. We get a 2 to 3 day storm coming in and stacking up one on another with 3 inches of rain, we have a problem. If it's early in the season, you'll see that water disappear maybe within 24 to 48 hours. If it's later in the season, you'll see water continuing to flow. Now granted, this watershed, the Sutter Creek watershed, goes all the way up to Dewdrop. Dewdrop, as you know, is maybe 5,000 foot elevation. There's not a lot of snow, but there is snow contributing. That's why we get a little more water down the Sutter Creek than say the Jackson Creek, which provides water to Lake Amador. Lake Amador watershed only goes to Pine Grove. How much does it snow in Pine Grove? Hardly any. We do not have any bank of water to push us through the season. There's a little bank on the Sutter Creek of water to push us maybe into June with water, but these are ephemeral streams. They dry up in the summer. They're not going to provide salmon. They're not going to provide long-term habitat. You'll get the otters and stuff in these pools, and maybe we need to focus on these pools to protect them so you can keep that wildlife that people want. Or the dairy hole, maybe that'll become, one of the points that we need to target. But I think the first thing we need to do, and this is just my recommendation, is just take a nice easy walk up to the city of Jackson and say, hey, this is the problem we have, how do you solve it? And they're going to give us a bullet point of list, this is what we've been doing for 50 years. Now why can't the city of Ione do the same darn thing?
Do they have a similar committee?
I have no idea. I'm not that good to know that one.
I have a question for Stacy and Mayor. Is the city willing to help out financially, help the homeowners, have you discussed that? And also, can we apply for a grant?
as a committee, what you need to do is create your questions, your recommendations.
Mhm.
Those would then come to council.
Okay.
And the entire council then has the ability to weigh in on it.
Okay.
We can't speak one way or the other what they will or won't do, because it has to be done as a body.
Okay.
So this is a very, for our first meeting, I think maybe the next meeting we should target goals. What's our goal? The vegetation, the levee, contacting homeowners. And then, take this committee, the trees grow and then they're gonna keep growing, but we're not gonna solve this problem overnight. I think maybe we can right now is probably our mission. What's our first mission? Is it to clean the vegetation? Is it to inform the public? Is it, we as the committee have to do our homework. We need Janice to come back with who owns the properties, who's responsible for this stuff. And we need to get a list of names. But those lists of names should probably sit on the side for a while until we can go out and actually talk and have some education behind us to say, well, this is what, we talked to the Fish and Wildlife Service, we talked to the City of Jackson.
The one thing I will say is go to Mule Creek and talk to them. When Mule Creek Prison came here, that was their deal. They were supposed to maintain the creek, and they did for years, and then they quit. I personally went and talked to them, and they said they would love to help again, but no one's took an after them.
Because
So
they
I can drop you some
they
names.
Keep the creek so clean.
Yeah, they used to.
They
Yeah, and
did.
then they quit. So I would attack them first too, and they're willing to help. They tell me that all the time, but no one asks.
Really?
So who do you go to, the superintendent?
I'll give you the name
Okay,
or names.
okay. Yeah, I think I agree with you. We want to be totally educated and already know what we're talking about before we approach any property owners. Obviously, we can see what we'd like done is it cleaned up. And so if we could do something about that, of course, that's probably on all of our minds. But yeah, definitely being very educated, finding out you know, who the contacts are and what we can do, and you know, everyone like has pride, you know, if we can get them involved as well, you know, they can be a part of our project if we have to, like you said, befriend them. Not that they're, you know.
Well, this is going to be a long-term relationship with whatever government. Right now, we don't, from what I see, we don't have a relationship with a government entity that's in control of how that creek is managed. We have no relationship with them. We have to create that relationship. From what I know, and this is just living in Ione, we have a couple game wardens. Those game wardens, I would kind of think, living in Ione might be a good resource to maybe point us in the right direction, or the people to talk to at Fish and Wildlife. I used to have really good contacts at Fish and Wildlife, and they've since moved on to where I could just pick up a phone, say, hey, I've got this creek, or I've got this, what can I can't do? And they would come out and assess it and said, well, you know, and the thing is, I don't think a lot of those government agencies, like the Fish and Wildlife Service, they're not against you maintaining the creek. They just want you to have, there's a process to do it. And we just need to learn what the process is, establish the relationship so we can continue this a long term. You know, maybe it's a stream alteration agreement that and that could be a big deal. That could be months and months, or maybe a year of editing and coming up with an agreement on how we're going to maintain the creek. And I think that should be our first, you know, getting into this is, okay, what, you know, you can't go around the Fish and Wildlife Service and say, well, this is what we're going to do. Just go in and ask them, what can we do? We think we have a concern. We want to protect our community. We know, and this is just common sense, if there's a big flood coming down and there's a lot of vegetation, it's going to back up the water. It's going to go down these streets up here. We don't want that. And if you go in with that attitude, you could probably get pretty far with the government agencies that everybody's scared of.
They're just people. Most of them are really nice.
Yeah.
On another, of course, I've been around a while, but remember when they wanted to put a dam out there, Fraser West or whatever, remember he ran for council or mayor or something years ago, and it said, vote Fraser for a dam or something like that. But down on Dry Creek and Sutter Creek, they wanted to put a big dam down there.
I actually have the plans in my office.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm. The Bureau of Reclamation actually came through here in the 1940s, 50s, and identified a lot of dam sites in the foothills for the communities. And Jackson Valley Irrigation District was one of them that took advantage of that. In 1967, it's a fairly new dam.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it could be done with today's philosophy on things, but you know, there's definitely dams that are on paper that could be built on these streams. That's not my goal with this committee. My goal with this committee is, let's get this creek cleaned up. Let's not end up in 2017 where everybody's crossing their fingers that it doesn't take out the supermarket. You know, and let's figure out who's responsible of that levee. If we see a gopher hole in it, who takes care of it? And if it is the city, then let's look for funding to do it. The city has a lot of power as a government agency to lean on FEMA, to lean on maybe some other types of grants to be able to solve problems. So anyway, is there any other, I think some of our goals would be inform the public, clean up the creek. It's probably as simple as that. And why we're doing it, make sure it's pretty.
Well, is there help that we could coordinate to help clean up the creek, like
Absolutely.
inmates or something?
Yeah, I think there's definitely resources out there. There's CAL FIRE, there's the prison crew, as Stacy mentioned. There's probably local contractors like my grandfather who used to be. There's a lot of people that love Ione, and the biggest resource is probably the prison system. Like, come on, they're sitting right there.
Yeah. Does Mill Creek go beyond the prison?
Yeah.
You know, they were really, they were wonderful. Years, it's been several years since they did it, but they really kept it clean.
To keep the meeting going, we have review of Brown Act recommendations or requirements.
Yeah, I think John put it in your packet for you guys to review.
Yeah, you,
We probably at one point will have, our attorney in the past has come to the meeting and did a review, so that might be in order. Good education. Yeah.
We'll definitely read through it again and take notes and everything.
So moving down to item 5, review of resources. We've kind of discussed that with the Conservation Service, Department of Fish and Wildlife has been a big topic. I didn't even think of the UC Cooperative Extension, and yeah, there's definitely resources out there, and that's kind of highlighting on what Tom said or was speaking about. There's definitely avenues that we could take. And this leads us down to item 6, which are goals, and we've kind of mixed things. But I'm thinking, just hearing everyone talking, that one main goal would be, and my main goal would be, the first thing is talk to the city of Jackson. And go up there and just have a casual conversation. What do you do? And that could be a report back to the committee at the next meeting. And I would like to get other people involved, and you know, I deal with the city of Jackson quite often with some other issues. If somebody would like to volunteer, I can help negotiate, or not negotiate, but if somebody's interested in meeting Bonnie up there, I would be more than happy.
I'll do that.
Okay. And I think it's just as simple as going in there and saying, hey, this is what we got, what do you guys do? How do you get your crew up here to clean it? And maybe ask the question, does the city own the creek, or do private property owners own the creek? How do you guys deal with this situation? And I think we get a lot of information from that. And that could be just one simple task, coming back to the next committee. The next one would be Janice maybe giving us some information on property owners, who owns what. Maybe, I don't know if you have any history on the levy. I know that's, it's kind of in a gray area. Who owns it? Is it the property owner owns it? I'd be scared if I owned a levy, to be honest.
Well,
Yeah,
most cities have levy districts that would be responsible.
You know, this is very front of it, but maybe we have to start a levy district to maintain the levy, to help protect the levy. From the just casual conversations I've heard about the levy is maybe it was grant funded. A government agency came in here, such as FEMA, I don't know if it was FEMA, and built the thing for the city, and then they left and everybody forgot who built it.
Yeah.
And as people move on, and it's a big deal. Somebody needs to not just take responsibility of it, but kind of give some guidance to it. And maybe that's our responsibility.
I'll try to do some research on that, how the levy was done and
Yeah, because I'm sure it wasn't just the property owners going out there and
No.
holding hands with shovels and building the levee. Knowing that they needed to build a levee to protect their grocery store, but
Well, the levees in the Delta, of course, were built with Chinese labor and out of peat. And that's why they fail every once in a while. So we had a Chinatown in Ione. Maybe they built the levee.
so those are just kind of, you know, piecing things together. Just talk to the city of Jackson, get some information. Let's keep it simple. Let's not overwhelm ourselves. I think the next meeting we can kind of educate ourselves with what's going on with the creek before we go out and inform everybody and knock on people's doors and not have anything to say. Maybe another task would, and I'm not sure, this might be a little fresh, would be contacting the Fish and Wildlife Service and getting in contact that way. Or maybe, if we're prepared, invite the Fish and Game Wardens. They're the ones that enforce it.
Yeah.
You know, start there. Maybe at the next committee, if we wanted to be really fast paced on this, invite Officer, what's his name, Officer Gregory in here, and his wife. They're both game wardens.
Yeah, they live here.
Yeah, they live right over here.
Well, one of them's not for Amador County, though.
I don't think that'll make much of a difference if we want information.
No, not with information.
You know, maybe we can fill up a meeting, the next meeting, give a report on what the city of Jackson does, get some information on some parcels. Maybe if Janice has found anything about who owns the levee, and maybe we can get a little presentation, and that'll fill up a good meeting on the next meeting.
They're, obviously, they're putting in streets right now for more houses, you know, towards Highway 104. I wonder, and that Mule Creek is adjacent to that development that they're doing. I wonder if they, what are they doing and why? The developer, because it goes up to Mule Creek.
You know, I read the information that was provided in the packet, and, you know, there's stormwater issues, and during my interview with the mayor, they were asking, you know, what are you gonna do about stormwater issues? My gut feeling, and this is just saying, I think we need to educate ourselves what the problems are before we dive into stormwater issues and what developers are doing. You know, we need to understand the creek and get familiar with it before we can,
Yeah.
and then kind of work our way back. That would be my approach.
But while they're developing these streets and they're working next to the Mule Creek, it would be advantageous to know what standards they have to live up to, or,
They have discharge standards, storm discharge permits. I almost guarantee it, and they're very strict. The Amador, not the Amador, but the California Water Quality Control Board is a big animal, and they have to meet all their requirements. That's why you see those little huts with their stormwater discharge permits in it, available to the public, I believe. You can go out there and see what the permits are as they're developing it. I've seen them out there. But
I wonder what they've done right now.
well, maybe that should be, could be another task for our next meeting, since this is happening so quickly, is report back on what's going on with the developers. Are they complying with their discharge permits? Would you like to be in charge of that, Tom?
Well, I'm going out of state for 2 weeks, starting Sunday. So, no, I better not.
You know, that's an issue to me that I would hope that there is people above us that are taking charge and they're complying with. And that's really not our issue at this point of if they're doing what I'm sure they have so many regulatory agencies watching them, being that they're a new development, that might not be our primary task.
Yeah.
Well, if we're in a flood plain, and I know my parents' house used to flood down there. Of course, the drainage weren't did Tykert put them in backwards or something back in the early 70s? Yeah, and the back house would flood all the time, but that might be a place to start too, because, you know, if you're refinancing your house or whatever, you have to get the flood insurance. So why, you know, so who's responsible? You know, someone made that rule, so maybe the Army Corps of Engineers or, you know, we can do some
I didn't have to have
investigating.
flood insurance where I live.
You did not? Yeah.
I have it through Grange, and we're not considered flood. Even though that flood in 96 and 97 took out all my flower beds and everything. I had a hole, it was terrible. But no, they don't consider it flood. I don't have to have flood insurance. But I'm stupid. I should have flood insurance if we don't get this creek cleared up, because I've seen too many places where the water could just sit and not flow properly, and that would make floods. Because I've seen logs. In fact, in 96, I didn't see it, but my neighbor did. A Volkswagen went down the creek.
Actually, that year, where our property in Sutter Creek, it was over the bridge on Sutter Creek Volcano Road. The creek was actually over. We have pictures of that. It's amazing.
I was trying to find this on my video, but I can't find it. I've got so many pictures in here. Takes you an hour to get through grandkids, but
Yeah.
I've got a beautiful video of that water. I mean, I'm 15 feet up, and it's right at the top.
Wow, scary.
So, being that this is a new committee, we're getting to know each other, we're getting to know, what our specific interest and what we're targeting. And I think we all have a common goal of cleaning the creek, and that should be our first task. And not getting it, and not maybe getting into stormwater issues just yet. And getting a handle on who owns the properties, what do we have here? Is it, is there a Caltrans issue with them owning the bridge? We brought up there's Volkswagens going down. What if the creek was so high and a tree hit the bridge, and now the bridge, you can't drive over the bridge, and it took the bridge out? This stuff, the 97 event, I'm old enough I experienced that. The 2017 event was actually, when it came to water coming down the river, or the creek, was actually, in our watershed, was more than 97. So these things are going to happen. That's 20 years. It's going to happen again. And if those are your 20-year storms, we should be prepared. If we have a 20-year storm next year, and we were only a foot and a half going over that levee, and nobody's out there maintaining the levee, I'd be scared. And then compounding the fact of, now you as a property owner on the creek, somebody points a finger and says you're responsible, and then you get a tree crew out there to say, okay, I want to, and they give you a $5,000 quote. Do you even want to own the creek at that point?
I don't have any trees at my side, but my neighbor sure does.
A substantial part of Sutter Creek, it borders the golf course, which is owned by the city. Right, Diane? So the city has the was going to have the responsibility for a substantial part of the cleanup, and it's steep there too. The golf course is like 12 feet above the creek.
So I think we all have a common interest, we have a common goal, and I think we should focus on that going into the next meeting. I think we can make a good meeting out of just some information on what the city of Jackson does, and some information from the city staff of what we can do. Where do we go? And do you guys want to put another layer on that of, inviting the Fish and Wildlife Service in? Does anybody have a way to contact them besides going and knocking on their door?
Are you talking about the Gregory's?
Yeah.
Oh, I can contact them.
Yeah.
Liz and Alan Gregory.
Okay.
They live on, over on Eagle.
Yeah.
That might be just a very top layer of what we're getting ourselves into, but they live that world. They can give us some guidance. We can tell them what our concerns are, and they say, well, this is the person you need to talk to, and we can save a lot of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be interested and curious to know why the prison hasn't helped like they used to. Just wonder who you'd get in touch with, how you'd get in touch with them to find out.
Stacy has a contact.
Stacy's gonna give you a contact for that.
Oh, you're gonna contact that? Okay.
No,
good.
you are. He's gonna give you
He's
guys a
gonna give us a
contact.
name.
Yeah, because that, to me, it seems like that was always such a easy thing, and they got a chance to get out and get some fresh air. But it might have been, somebody might have got hurt, I don't know. Did someone run away? I don't know, it just all of a sudden they stopped it.
It's going to be a big task at this point because there hasn't been maintenance done for probably 20 years, maybe even more. And the floods help by cleaning it out, but they also create risk.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm down to, we kind of glossed over future agenda items. Anybody else? That would give us 4 items to discuss on our next meeting that would really kind of put us into position of where do we go from there.
Definitely. Actually, you might be able to go by there tomorrow.
The Gregory's?
No, by.
Oh, Zach, yeah. I haven't talked to the city manager lately, but I do have her contact. If you just want to go maybe door knock, that's probably the easiest. Say we established this committee and,
Is that by the police department?
yeah.
Given the closures and that, you might want to call first.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably
bring
we
up-
should share each other's contact. I would think it would be useful.
Everybody's email or
Um,
phone number?
If people promise not to call my phone all the time, I do really good on email.
Emails.
Yeah.
Probably best.
Janice, will they be set up with City of Ione emails? Or are they going,
I could just do my private. I don't.
well, you are subject to the Brown Act, so you want,
Okay.
your private email could become
Correct.
subject
Yeah,
to
you're right.
very
You're right.
careful. So I do believe you should be set up
Yep.
with City of Ione emails.
If you don't have it for planning or parks, that might be a good
Ever.
idea to do,
They are not?
but might be a good idea to get them all set up.
Yeah, they're, because you can't expect them to use their private email for that.
Well, that's
City
even
business.
subject to text messages or anything you receive on your phone. Which I think maybe at the next meeting, we should really dive into that.
Yeah, the Brown Act, I strongly recommend you read that, and take it to heart, because state of California takes it very seriously.
Well, they're gutting it left and right with the COVID.
Yeah, well.
And I think a lot of the things are not coming back, like the conference calling. I've had more people attend my meetings since COVID existed than ever before through conference call.
Right, because they
It's my
can.
new way of life.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess back to my comment, everybody feel comfortable that that'll be our direction in the next meeting? Get some information, try to do a little bit of homework, not too much. I don't know what everybody's expectation is on, we're what, a 2-year committee?
You're,
1
yeah,
year.
1 and 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you
Two
would
people have the
be,
1 year and 3 people
because
have
it's a
the
brand
2
new
year.
committee.
Yeah, it's brand
Who gets what?
Tom and Lisa have the 1 year. You have.
Was that by appointment? Okay.
That's by ordinance.
Yeah, it's in our.
But you, as the mayor, appointed them as
Yes.
the 1 year?
Now, once the committee is standing, it'll be 2 and 3 years.
And what's it take to make a standing committee?
You're standing now, so the next appointment, once the year done, the next appointments would be for 2 and 3.
Right.
Got it. Everybody good with that? Okay. Is everybody ready to adjourn? No more comments?
Yeah, ready to.
I didn't quite hear what that was, what you just said.
It was on who is appointed at what, for how long.
Okay.
So you have, right now you have 1 year and 2 year appointments. Once the committee is now considered standing, the next group of appointments will be 2 and 3 years.
Okay.
And Sally, you're a 2-year. Unless you decide
that's
to
what-
run from us.
That in our
Yes.
letter to you. That's fine. So our next meeting would be the 13th of August.
No, our next meeting would be, yes, you're right.
August 13th.
The second Thursday.
So, a point of order, when you finish your discussion, you do have to open it to public comment. So you do have, I don't know if there's people on the phone or not, you do have at least one public in the audience. So you do have to open it up for public comment.
I would like to open it up for public comment. Is anyone on the speakerphone or here in person?
Yeah,
hope you guys sound like you're trying to do a good job. Hope it works out.
Thank you.
And you need any help, I know a little bit, and so's my wife.
Do you require them to announce their name?
No.
Okay.
Well, my name's Larry Rose. And I do
We
live
do.
on the creek, as he buries the dairy holes very close to me.
Yeah, that's right.
What is city, do I adjourn at a certain time or just adjourn?
Close public comment.
Okay, I close the public comment, and
then you
I
ask
adjourn the
them-
meeting. Do you state the time when I
You have,
adjourn?
you just ask for they have to do a motion for adjournment? We do at the city council. At the committee level, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, I make a motion for adjournment.
A second.
I'll second that.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Do you announce the time?
No.
No, okay.
All right.
That's what you get.
And
And it's recorded.